I had a completely different video planned for this week, but unfortunately I've had to delay it while I wait for some spares to be delivered. So at the last minute I've pulled this off the shelf. A while ago a chap asked me to review one of these. I think he knew it was going to be awful, but he just wanted to hear me say so. So I bought one and I just couldn't face it in the end. Well, today seems to be as good a day as any to face my demons. So this is a portable cassette player. It says it's a player, but in reality it's a recorder, one-touch record. Now that's kind of typical of devices like this, these modern day nasty, cheap, plasticky, horrible personal stereos. They tend to be recorders. I mean, back in the day your personal stereo wouldn't normally have a speaker on it. Yeah, there were some with them, but as a general thing they didn't. And also generally they didn't record. They were more players, personal stereos. Again, yes, you could get recorders, but your average personal stereo didn't have a speaker, didn't record. This is really a dictation machine that's then been kind of re-engineered or rebranded slightly to be classed as a personal stereo. Now, talk about rebranding. Bosch, they were a well-known UK manufacturer of radios, was really the thing that they became most known for, but other equipment over the years. That branding was bought by the retail chain Argos in 2008, and it will be no surprise that this came from Argos. So yeah, they just stuck the Bosch branding on there. If you go on Alibaba, you can buy one of these without any branding on it whatsoever, or ask them to put whatever label you want on there. But hey, let's open it up and have a look. Now, I'll move the cassettes out of the way. I'll just mention here, I've got a few test tapes. Well, that's a Type 2, so it's probably not going to be suitable for this, but I've got a sine sweep, stereo test, wow and flutter test. I got some YouTube audio library on a Type 1 tape there, so I can do some tests, and of course I can also test my own audio, but I won't be able to play any of that in the video, of course. Now, let's just get in here. Yeah, now one thing I wanted to mention about these, a bit of an update to previous videos. Of course, we mentioned in the past that there's only really one type of cassette mech being made nowadays. I mean, there are a couple, but they're the kind of very cheap end of the thing. I call them Tanashin mechanisms, but I've kind of been corrected by videos from VWestlife, who's investigated this even more, and some of the ones that I thought were Tanashin or Tanashin were actually copies of those. And then on top of that, it's possible to spec up a Tanashin mech or even a copy mech with different quality of components. You could have a metal flywheel, you could have a plastic flywheel, you could have really cheap motors, and there's fake motors going around. I mean, they're real motors, but they're not like Sankyos and stuff. I'm going to link you to VWestlife's video in the description so you can learn more about that. But you know, whenever I've mentioned in the past that really there aren't any decent quality cassette mechs being made anymore, the number one thing that people will say is, but what about that TIAC one or that Tascam one? There's a Tascam or TIAC. I think it's a twin tape, or is it a tape and a CD? Anyway, that one. Yeah, they're using Tanashin mechanisms again. I mean, it's all they can get. It's not their fault. That said, if you get a Tanashin mechanism and you put a metal flywheel in it and a decent motor, it'll be okay. I'd say it's like akin to, say, if car manufacturers nowadays who are making combustion engine cars, they could only get hold of one engine and it was from a Lada Riva made in, say, 1990 or something. Well, I mean, it's all right. It gets you from A to B. There's probably no problem with it. And it's all right in a budget car. But the trouble is, once you start putting that same engine in, say, a Bentley, it gets a little bit ridiculous. And that's really where I was coming from with these things. A cheap mech and a cheap cassette deck, you're going to get a cheap result. But if it's cheap, well, what do you expect? Let's put some batteries in here. So it's going to be 2 AA's, Kirkland batteries. People always say Kirkland batteries leak, and they're not wrong. But who really cares in something like this? Now, we've got a clip on the back. I'm going to take it off because it's kind of annoying me, but that's your belt clip there. There we go. Right. Again, personal stereos did not tend to have a big old aerial on the back. I mean, these things are a bit of a concoction, isn't it? It's a few things together. I mean, it's like more of a radio than a cassette player, but we'll just open it up inside here. I'm looking for an eject lever. Of course, I'm a bit overly optimistic there. There'll be no eject lever, it'll just be pulling the door, I'd imagine. Let's read the buttons here. I don't know if you can see this. Rewind, fast forward, stop, play and record. Those are nasty looking buttons, aren't they? All at kind of weird different angles from one another. But yeah, I don't see the eject button yet. No doubt it's going to be the stop. That's what usually happens. Oh, no, it just opens. Or does it? Yeah, it does. Okay, now let's have a look in here and see if we can figure out if this is going to be mono or stereo. It's sad if it's mono, isn't it? But did you notice on the box, I just moved it to one side here, whenever it says something like Portable Cassette Player, and it's like a one speaker on it, I'm not expecting stereo. Play and record your favourite station so you can record off the radio, built-in speaker, share your music. I'm sure everyone will want to listen to that. Belt clipping earphones for easy listening anywhere, and one touch record for dictation. But yeah, nothing about stereo, is there? Okay, well, let's find out for ourselves. Going to take a bit of a weird camera angle, this one. Yeah, just when you thought things couldn't get any worse, mono tape head. You can tell it's mono because it's just the one square of silver in the middle. If it was stereo, that would be split in half. There'd be like a black line in the middle of it. Great. Well, this is one less test I'm going to have to make with this machine, but it is disappointing, the fact that it's mono. But it just shows that you can't assume anymore. I mean, someone of my age looks at a personal stereo and would call it a personal stereo, but nowadays it's like a personal mono. And the fact it didn't mention stereo on the box was the thing that's the giveaway. Nowadays, unless it says something, it's quite possibly not that thing. So yeah, don't assume that it's stereo. But let's go through the controls on here. So top left, headphone volume, T and R, so that's tape and radio, and then tuning for the radio. On the bottom, DC 3 volts, centre neg. Right, let's put the radio on. Hopefully we won't hit anything that content matches.
I'm so excited to see
there we go.
all about
Oh, he's gone. Where's he gone?
and well-being, as well as their education. I'm Mr. Ivor, a primary school head teacher. As well as cleaning, hand washing, ventilation and bubbles, there'll be extra protection with twice weekly COVID-19 testing available to...
Well, that's not going to date this video in the future, is it? But there we go. Let's put a tape in here. Type 1's the other one. It's going to play properly. So that's what I'm using. I wouldn't normally use a tape of this quality. That's a bit dodgy, isn't it? Right, okay. Now, it'll no doubt come through the speaker, this, to start with. Wow. Wow and Flutter Central. You know what, it would have to be 3 times better than that to be considered as complete crap. But let me just plug the output from that into the camera so you can have a miserable experience all to yourself. Now, I know you are really enjoying that, but sorry to break it up. I'm going to have to demonstrate one further thing with this cassette in a different machine, because whenever I've reviewed something and I've said that it's a bit rubbish, of course, you always get people jump to the defence of things like this. I don't know why they do it, but they'll say that it's user error, I'm doing it wrong. In this case, it'd be the tape was recorded badly. Let's play the same tape. Look, nothing up my sleeves, and we'll put it in this Sony WM-D6C. Yes, this is not a fair fight as far as quality goes. All I'm doing here is demonstrating the tape was originally recorded properly. It was just reproduced pathetically. So let's plug this into the camera, and then you can have a listen to that one. Now there's one test I wanted to do which didn't work out. I wanted to record the radio and then play it back. The idea being we'd listen to the live radio and then compare that against the recording. Unfortunately, I didn't realise at the time that whenever I plugged the headphone output into my camera, it went out of tune. And then when you unplugged it, it was perfectly in tune again. So I was listening to it on the speaker thinking, yeah, that's fine. Plug the headphone output in, record it. All I got was static. Of course, I realised afterwards that it'll be using the headphone wire as the aerial whenever they're plugged in, so you don't have to have the full aerial extended. So the recording test was a wash, and you'll see later on in the video why I'm unable to go back and re-record that section. But we know what we would have got. It would have been a low-fidelity mono recording with a generous helping of WoW and Flutter. And if there's anyone out there wondering if the radio output in FM is stereo, well, I very much doubt it. It's one of the things I wanted to test at that moment as well when I listened back to the recording, which wasn't there. But I'd recommend buying any other radio other than this one, because for me, it only picked up one station with any kind of quality in this room, whereas any other radio that I bring in here picks up half a dozen. Okay, remember this, the spectrum analyzer from a few videos ago? Well, what I'm going to do with this is, I've got this cassette with a sine sweep on it, logarithmic scale. So this is a series of notes that goes from very low up to very high and just keeps doing that over and over again. Now, ideally, it should light each of these columns up one after the other. But because it's on a tape, and tape has a limited frequency response, especially on this Type 1 tape, it won't light all the columns up. It'll go somewhere in the middle. So the idea is the more you light up, the higher your range of frequencies that the device can reproduce. The more towards the middle it goes, the lower frequencies are getting cut off, as are the higher ones. So we'll see how it performs. But again, first, let's just play it back in my D6C, just to give you an idea as to what this can reproduce. Okay, now I'm going to press play, but bear in mind that this tape is a very budget Type 1 tape. This device could perform much better than this, but we'll see where it gets up to at the top, the highest frequency that it's able to reproduce off this tape. And it's getting past 10, 12.5, bit of 16 and no 20. So it gets up to 16K at the top there. Remember that number for when we show the other device and see how far that gets up. And now we'll have a look where it gets to at the bottom. I think it shows a little bit of 20, but then gets better at 25 and up. You'll see a few sort of shadow frequencies popping in here. Ignore those. But yeah, 20, 25, yeah, we're doing fine there. So let's zoom in again. I'll just show you that in a little bit more detail. So we'll have a look at the top first. Okay, so here we go. It starts to fade off around about 6.3K. And then after that, it gets a little bit more indistinct on the upper frequencies. Let's look at the bottom. Okay, so it's just about to loop around in a second. Keep your eye on the 20 at the left. It gets about halfway up there, and then it gets stronger as it moves through the other frequencies. But it pretty much covers all the frequencies you should be able to hear, even off this quite cheap Type 1 tape. So let's move on to the bush, see how well that does. There we go. Now, it's not broken. It's just on a part of the frequency range that it's not able to reproduce at the moment. You'll see it's popping in there now at the bottom. So it starts, I think, around 80. There might have been a bit of 63 Hertz. Then it works its way up. And these bits are all right. The volume's a bit higher on this one. That's why it's peaking in red. And then it's dropping off at 10. Just wait for it to come back round again. See where it first appears. Yeah, at 80. So you can see we're concentrating the audio in the middle here. 80 up to about there. I think it was it 8 or 10? Let's just have a look again. Yeah, tiny bit of 10. So really 8 kilohertz at the top and at the bottom 80 hertz. So we're missing the top and bottom off there very much with this machine. Yeah, excellent, isn't it? Let's try WoW and Flutter. Okay, to set a base level, WMD6C again. It's playing at the moment. We've got both of these set to 1% at the top. Zero's in the middle of this one, zero's on the left of that one. Looks like nothing's happening. Looks like it's not even switched on. So let's just put it to 0.3 at the top. And we'll put that one to 0.3 at the top as well. Yeah, so the speed's dead on. As far as the Flutter goes, well, 0.3 is hardly doing anything. Let's put 0.1 at the top. So there's 0.1. It's like 0.08% WoW and Flutter on this one. And some of that is down to the tape, but let's just leave it there, move the tape across, put it into the bush. Okay, well there we go, we pegged both of them straight away. Of course that's on this very tight 0.1% at the top, so let's put 1% at the top on that one and 1 on that. So we're both at 1 now. These were showing at effectively 0 on the other machine. That one's off the chart, that's the speed. So the speed's too fast. Let's put it on 3% at the top. Yeah, it's running over 3% fast. I'm not too sure how much over. That's as far as this thing will go. And then on, oh, it's going down a bit now. Look at this. This is the kind of thing that happens with these. Just so variable. You know, they're not able to keep control of the speed at all. That's where things like quartz lock come in more sophisticated devices. But over here, 1% at the top, we're running at 0.5 on the top row there, perhaps, yeah, 0.5% up to 0.6% wow and flutter. So the other machine 0.08, this 0.5, 0.5% wow and flutter. But it's what's to be expected, and as I mentioned before, it's a budget device. But, you know, take all those things into consideration. Let's open it up now and just see what's going on inside. So I'm interested to see what kind of mechanism is in here, and also whether or not it's got a plastic flywheel on it, and also if we can find out who makes the motor. So let's take this apart. Let's just there we go. Right, so that's your wire for your aerial. That's attached up to the back there, soldered on. You can see the mechanism here. It's all plastic, of course. So yeah, these are, I suppose these are the flywheels. We've got two in here. Plastic on the outside, metal on the inside. It's amazing how they try and cut the cost of these things down. I mean, you could have done the whole thing metal and it would have had a less of a wow and flutter issue. And then we've got the motor down here. Let's just keep going and see what we can find in here. Now, the presence of two flywheels would suggest that this device is able to play in either direction, which reminded me that back when that chap asked me to do a review of it, the one thing that intrigued me was the fact it was being advertised as an auto-reverse device. Now, of course, the one I have here can't do auto-reverse. The tape head would need to be able to play either side of the tape for that to happen, which this one can't. There's also no mention of auto-reverse on the packaging or in the instructions. However, the Argos website does still have one old image of an auto-reverse version, and the device itself still has that telltale play button with the arrows that point in either direction. So it turns out that this device can be spec'd up to be an auto-reverse unit, and it seems like much of the mechanism that enabled that feature still remains inside. That's a lot of cogs in there, isn't it? By the way, don't worry about this thing. I'm going to be using this for spares. For example, that belt will come in handy somewhere. I'm sure some of these other components in time might come into use. There's a lot going on in there, isn't there? Flipping out. It's like a crap clock, isn't it? Anyway, it's time to try and get the top off this and see who makes the motor. Okay, just a load of numbers and letters on here. It doesn't mention a company name unless the company is called XRF300C14270200413, made in China. That's about it. I wonder if there's anything under here. Take it off slowly. No. Okay, right. But there you go, that's the mech that you get in these cheap decks, no doubt. Maybe it's the same one you get in all the personal stereos. I can't really say that there's any quality in this whatsoever, but I mean, it kind of works. It just feels very grindy, the whole thing. There's no smoothness to it whatsoever, but it's made extremely cheaply, no doubt. And there are quite a good number of components on it. I mean, just look at that. It's a lot of stuff going on for very little reward. But yeah, as I say, I'm going to keep these as spares. I've got little springs here, little switches and things, other stuff that I might be able to use in the future. It's probably worth more to me in spares. Well, definitely worth more to me in spares than it was as a working machine. But one thing I definitely don't need is another mono head. That's pretty weak, isn't it? But there you go. That's what you get. That's the Bush Personal Mono from Argos. Hopefully next time I'll have something a little bit more deserving of your time and mine. But that is it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.